Hello, everybody. So this is the third video lecture on the topic of stress. And we left off on the last one talking about arousal and performance and adaptation and arousal. Then these couple chapters, I want to talk about the relationship between our physiology and our psychology and sort of how some of that works. So in this slide represents a couple important concepts about aging. Okay, so telomeres refer to the end of the DNA. They're much like that plastic cap on the end of your shoelace. And you know, when the plastic cap breaks off or falls off, how it causes your shoelace to fray. Well, telomeres act in the same way. And when they are gone, they prevent the DNA from fraying during cellular division. So when every time a cell divides, the telomeres get shorter and shorter. Well, cortisol, which is a stress hormone, causes the decay or the dissolving of telomeres. So that means that cellular repair, aging is a byproduct of cellular repair and cellular division. So when your cells don't repair and don't divide anymore, that's effectively what aging is. Cortisol means that they divide, or means that they have fewer opportunities to divide. So what I'm trying to say is cortisol reduces telomeres, and when all the telomeres at the end of your DNA strands are gone, then the cells die and they can't reproduce. When your cells die, that's when we age. Okay, and eventually we die. I hope that makes some sense. Cancer is caused by cells growing out of control, that they just continue to grow and continue to grow and continue to divide. My understanding is that the relationship between telomeres and cancer is that if there's too much, I think it's called telomerase. If there's too much telomeres, then those cells grow out of control. There's a video in your modules that explains it. I hope much better than I do. Over here on the right, but the key is telomeres at the end of your DNA, cortisol. When telomeres are gone, DNA can't divide, cortisol shortens telomeres. Then you have this term over here called psychoneuroimmunology. And it's a fancy way of talking about the relationship between the what's going on in your head, your general nervous system, and your immune system. So your central nervous system is linked to your immune system, to your glands, right? Because it's your glands out there that secrete all of your hormones by way of your sympathetic nervous system. Your sympathetic nervous system is that one that acts quickly, right? Lymphocytes, that's the bulk of your immune response. Lymphocytes have receptors, so stress hormone can lock onto them. Lymphocytes can also cause the production of neurotransmitters and hormones. So when the brain says we're under stress, we need to protect ourselves, that causes your sympathetic nervous system to respond, which has implications for your hormones, which has implications for your neurological system. That's why it's all interconnected, right? And so what's important then, or part of what's important, is what's going on up here in our noggin, how we think about things, right? And a couple elements are pretty important here. One is our sense of control, the perception. Remember I said that way back in the first part of the chapter, is that perception is really important, how we think about things, particularly the perception that we have of how much of what happens to me do I have some control over. This is what's called locus of control. So think about this word as like location, loci, the center of. Where does your control reside? Does it reside internally inside of you or externally? Is the world just happening to you and it's all just, I have no control? That would be external locus of control. Or do you feel like I can do something about my life? I can do something about the world, right? Or I can do something about how how I interact with the world. So when we have internal locus of control, that is considered that we have less stress theoretically, because the key here is that we must have a realistic expectation of control. Because when we have an unrealistic expectation of control, then people start to think we're crazy. So let me use an example. So when we are confronted with a stressor and we didn't anticipate we would have all this work to do, and we have an internal locus of control, okay, I got this, I will just work hard and I can get this done. I can do this, right? That's good. That's good. It puts us to work and we get our work done. We keep our nose to the grindstone, kind of speak. But if we have an unrealistic expectation, like we think that we can, the hurricane's coming and I can prevent the hurricane, right? And people might think you're a little crazy if you think that somehow you can do something about that hurricane or the tornado's coming, right? You can make that tornado go away. Or a friend of mine used to think that whenever he drove up to a stoplight, he could will the stoplight to change color. We all thought he was kind of crazy, right? That's not, anyway. So the idea here is that we do better psychologically when we do have a sense that things just don't happen to me randomly. I can do something about when we have an internal locus. I have some control over what happens, because then life is more predictable. Remember, going back to a previous slide, it said something on there about uncertainty and fear. Things are less frightening. We have more certainty. But there's this balance, right? So this is a really cool thing that our culture has, that our culture has a mechanism of getting a way that we can get the benefit of having an internal locus of control, even when it's a little bit illogical. And that is because of spirituality and religion, right? So a hurricane is coming. We're living in the middle of a pandemic. There's really very little that I can do about a tornado, a hurricane, a flood, right? I can't do much about that. But I can I can take control over my control, so to speak, by saying, I turn it over to the divine. I give my control to my divine. And in that way, we benefit from this internal aspect. I hope that makes some sense. But I'll tell you what, that's been documented over and over again, is that religious people have a higher, they handle stress better than non-religious people, or spiritual people, whatever word you want to use. But people who believe in a power beyond themselves, they do better. And I think this is partly one of the reasons. I want to jump down here to personality types. You may have heard the phrase type A versus type B personality types. The research goes all the way back to some cardiologist, and there was the guy that fixes the chairs, an upholsterer, and he observed that the chairs were worn on the arms and on the seat. And he asked what kind of doctor are you? Why are your chairs worn right here? He didn't see that wear pattern in other places. And it led to the question of what kind of people, what are the personality characteristics? What are the behavioral characteristics that make one more susceptible to cardiac problems, to heart attack? And from there emerges this idea of type A versus type B, right? So type A people are characterized by, always being in a hurry, being ambitious and competitive, and maybe always kind of on edge. And those type B people are characterized by, being a bit more laid back, a little bit more chill. And so some research says, well, that doesn't make any sense. Just because I'm competitive or I'm in a sense of urgency, that doesn't explain heart disease. But from that personality characteristic, they observe that that's right. It's not being competitive. It's not being ambitious. It's not being in a hurry. But it's this variable right here that's in italics. It's hostility. Angry people, hostile people, right? Not competitive people or ambitious people. That's not the key. It's when you're angry. And this makes sense because hostility requires, like, when somebody's quick to anger, you're just going to lay into somebody for cutting in front of you in line or at the stoplight. That puts a lot of pressure on the heart. That's your sympathetic nervous system. A lot of attention, a lot of that sympathetic nervous system acts really quickly. So it's okay to be competitive and ambitious, but it's this hostility part that puts you at risk for a heart attack, right? As opposed to type B. I'm getting right up on 10 minutes and I don't want to rush this. So I'm going to stop here. And in the next lecture, I want to talk about what it means to be optimistic versus pessimistic. This is, I think, a commonly confused concept. So I want to make sure I have enough time.